All right, so let's talk about how to get unstuck, right? This is a popular topic given the fact that it's, January, beginning of January, and most people are setting, New Year resolutions, right? And so part of the process of getting unstuck is recognizing that our entire reality, in terms of the words that we're using, typically is mass media driven, right? So the foundation, where your thoughts are coming from, and then we can get to being unstuck, right? So in that process, I'll share what that process is. But first, we want to define where are your thoughts coming from, right? And so one would think that many of our thoughts are coming from study, right? We read books, we study the subject, and we get this very unbiased conditioned view perception of the thing. But is that really what's happening, right? And so the example I use is love, right? It's a topic that we feel like we all know. And where does it come from, right? Where's your concept of love coming from? Is it from academic, scientific studies of what the response to love is? Is it from reading, philosophical books like Rumi and some of the experts on this topic? Or is it simply by watching television, movies, and reading books, right? Because when you were young, when the concept of love was first formed, I'm assuming that did not come from academic studying philosophical literary works of art. It actually mostly came from, watching TV, reading books and things, and potentially projected from your relationship with your parents. And there we go back, where did they get it from? Assuming your parents weren't like psychologists in literary studying of, Rumi and some of the ancient works on the topic of love. They probably got it from movies and television. And so we start to realize that many of our concepts is actually from fiction, right? It's from a company that owns media companies that then hire writers that write drama, right? The hero's journey, the story arc of drama. And many of our concepts actually come from that. And so if that's the case for love, which is a big aha, where else is this showing up in our lives, right? Fitness, mindset, career, job, anything, right? Where is it really coming from, right? And so, hey, Jayesh, hopefully you're still in India, having fun. Love the pictures that you're posting. So you start to realize that many of our concepts actually comes from fiction, right? Someone else's reality, someone else's imagined reality. And what's even more interesting is it's coming from someone else's heightened drama imagined reality, right? And so we would all like to think that, our concepts that we have free will, right? And so let's discuss what is actually free will. Do you really have a choice, right? We'll use breakfast as an example, right? If I were to offer you a choice of cereal, eggs, or miso soup for breakfast, right? If you're in America right now watching this, my guess is you probably would not choose miso soup, right? You probably would choose cereal or eggs, right? Now, you might think that is your choice, but why didn't you choose miso soup? Well, probably because in this culture, every movie, TV show, or thing that you read, the image and the commercials embedded, right, that cereal and eggs are typical breakfast foods and miso soup isn't. Whereas in Japan, they have their own sort of cultural differences and miso soup is a common breakfast food. And so you think you have choice, but technically your choices were pre-framed, looking to Chaldeanese work, pre-framed into looking at it a certain way, right? Hey, Tom. Hey, Josh. So you start to realize it's like, how much free will do we really have, right? How much of our choices are actually biased and programmed from all the media that we've consumed, right? This is, in my mind, in reality, very important to recognize, right? Because how do we step outside of that? How do we become an observer of our subconscious choices? And the only way in my reality to do that is to recognize where those subconscious choices come from. If you don't have this understanding, you are I dare to use the word slave to the mass media projections, right? And just keep in mind, a handful of companies own most of the media companies. Those handful of companies, those corporate executives actually are controlling you and you don't know it, right? So you recognize this is the game. And so once you recognize this, right, this is the starting point. Okay, I'm mostly being influenced and biased by media. All the images of everything I've ever seen has been in me, and I become the observer of it. So the next step, let's go one step farther here. How do we break out of the cycle that we're in? Well, you kind of recognize that aside from the mass media influence and programming, right? You have stories that you have developed, right? When you watch some of those mass media TV shows, movies, and things, and observing your own life, you've assigned a certain story, a meaning, right, that makes sense to you. And I've talked about this a lot in previous videos. That meaning in that moment was the most serving of you in that moment, right? It's not outdated. It's not limiting. They're not bad. They were just the best that your cognitive abilities were able to do in that moment. And so we just don't have the practice of upstating or up stories. And so we need the stories. Now, one level closer to getting unstuck is the language, right? Even right now, given that it's January 3rd, many of you might be thinking, I want my New Year resolutions, right? Mass media language resolution, implying that you currently have problems, right? You can only have a problem to resolve, right? Resolution means resolving something. Something isn't working, right? The mass media language doesn't say New Year gratitude, right? It doesn't say New Year updating, New Year choosing what to love. It's specifically New Year resolution, right? We're absolutely being controlled by language, right? Mass media language. And so you start to recognize, okay, how do I choose better language? How do I choose the language that actually gives me freedom? Many terms that mass media uses is already pre-framing you, right? Resolution pre-frames that you have a problem, right? And so you get to step outside of yourself again as the observer, look at the words I'm actually using that is not pre-framed, that is neutral, right? For example, in other videos to talk about, the hot topic right now, the hot word is trauma, right? And it was a heightened emotional experience. That's what it is. By the time you call it trauma, you've assigned it a meaning already. And we're thinking that we want to resolve trauma. But what if you don't even call it trauma, you call it something else, right? It's already pre-framing you for a certain path, and we don't realize that this is happening, right? So you want to be on top of your language patterns. And let's go one level deeper to how to get unstuck. This is talked about a lot in Facebook memes, right? Life is about lessons, right? And on one hand, it is about lessons, but where are we looking to identify those lessons? And so in the last post, I talked about the hologram. This is a very important concept. I've gotten some messages for clarification of the hologram, right? And so if you choose to learn, I'm not saying you learn all the time, because that is a linear process and nothing in the universe is linear, right? Dig deep into this. You have a choice. Sometimes you embody oneness where you're just being, there is no learning. And sometimes duality and learn. So I'm speaking only in the duality reality, right? And so in the duality reality, as you're learning, many of us are looking at the actual thing, right? And so in the hologram example, I talked about, right, a very concrete example is hot and cold, right? So if you experience hot, right, let's say you put your hand in 90-degree water, and you go, ooh, that's hot. And then you put your hand in 0-degree water, and you go, ooh, that's cold. Some of us are getting and looking at and focusing on, hot. What does hot mean? What does cold mean? That's the initial level of understanding. A deeper level is, changing the temperature from 90 to 80 to 70 to 60, all the way to 0 degrees. And as you experience that temperature range, you start to have this understanding of, there's this concept of temperature and a range of temperature. It's not just hot and cold. There's a range, and how your body, even your hand in this case, your fingers, actually responds differently to each temperature. And if you really tune in, you kind of realize, my whole body actually responds differently to the entire range. And so what's happening is I call it the hologram, right? And so how a hologram is made is two sources of light come up. Where they intersect, that's the image that you see. And so to create a full hologram, the light source is kind of moving and projecting into different areas, and that creates this hologram, right? This different intersection point. I believe if you believe in God, we'll use God words. If you believe in the universe, or if you believe that we live in a computer simulation, I'll say simulation. Those are the three possibilities at this point in my reality, is that at the surface, right, we're experiencing the thing. But the meta of this is what's the hologram that's being shown, right? As you realize that there's this intersection point of these two light sources, you get to see the real lesson, the hologram. And once you see that hologram, the need to experience the light source, you stop looking at the light source. The other way said it is the pattern gets unstuck, right? Because you actually obtained what God, universe, the simulation wants you to see, which is the actual hologram, right? It has nothing to do really with the source of light. We get caught up in looking at the source of light. I have this situation in my life. You could actually experience the opposite of that concept of that situation and imagine or actually experience it. If you can't imagine it, trust me, God, universe, simulation will have you experience it. This is welcome to duality. And so you actually get to imagine it, and you imagine the subtle nuances between the pendulum swing. And as this pendulum swings, right, it creates an image. And once you see that hologram image, that's how you truly get unstuck in your patterns. Right, here's the interesting part. We all can see a different hologram image, right? Because as this hologram is generated, you might be standing from here, I'm standing from over here, someone else is standing here, someone else is over here, and we can all see different aspects of this hologram. In other words, there is no right image, right? In God, universe, and computer simulation, there's no such thing as positive, negative, right, wrong, good, and bad. These are just ego terms that we use to judge the actual hologram. It's just a hologram. We bring our own judgment to it. So if you first let go of the judgment of it, you can actually see it for truly what it is. It just is. And you get to assign a meaning to this hologram. What does this hologram mean from these multiple light sources of duality, right? For example, we can use, let's use some opposites, right? And so let's do a concrete example. Let's say you are financially well off and then you're poor. Like those are opposites, right? And so as you experience this duality, you might realize the hologram is that actually it's not about the making the money. It's money is an energy, right? The hologram is money is actually an energy that you get to, and maybe moving for you, that energy involves serving humanity, or maybe involves you helping your family. Energy and that money means for you freedom, right? Whatever it may mean. So you have your own hologram to see. Imagine the opposite ends of the spectrum. You actually get a full appreciation for what this hologram is, right? And so let's use another. You're in a happy relationship where there's great communication, connection, and of course you have some relationships where there's a disconnect. You're literally just avoiding that person, right? Some opposites of duality. Well, relative to you, what's the hologram? Maybe it's because certain elements of each person, right? Each personality is actually a mirror of something that's within you that you haven't fully integrated, sat with, accepted, or found the value of, right? And so like this applies to obviously politics, right? And so if you're seeing someone act a certain way, whoever's in office, a certain way that irritates you, it's probably because you have opposing views, right? You haven't seen or you haven't integrated that view, that action, and understanding why is that person behaving that way? What was their history, right? Because ultimately, instead of judging the person as being good or bad, ultimately God, universe, and the simulation wants us to understand the why, right? The hologram. How did that person come about? What were the thinking processes, emotions, stories within that person that led to that? Because when you realize that story, you then apply it to yourself and you go, oh, right, that understanding makes sense in my life. I may have shared that or the opposite of that, right? Either sharing the same story or the opposite of the story or slightly similar, right? That's the gradient. And a hologram is essentially understanding humans, right? Why people are behaving the way they behave. And through that understanding of why of the other comes the understanding of self, because that in itself is a duality, right? Many layers to this, right? It's like a spiral. And so once you understand this, again, obviously, if you think about it, the pattern must end because your entire perception of the entire hologram and the duality of that completely shifts, right? Again, if this is still nebulous, let's apply this to fitness, right? And so sometimes I'll put on my 30-year experience of fitness world hat on. And so let's just say in shape, out of shape, right? And we can say X pounds overweight if you're stuck. Right, I've read a lot of people that feel like, oh, I'm stuck, I'm gaining weight during the holidays, right? And so some people actually are just very fit year round, right? So let's apply this hologram duality aspect to fitness and weight. So when you gain the weight, right, we're focusing, looking at the light source is that I'm eating, the calorie exercise. This is where currently the fitness industry, most fitness professionals are looking at. What are your calories? Your food, calories in, calories out, getting the exercise, you fast, to get rid of the calories and you control your calories and all that stuff. That's like looking at the light source. But as your weight is going up and down, right, as you're swinging from healthy weight to unhealthy weight, what is the hologram, right? What is the God, universe, and simulation trying to show you about yourself as your weight fluctuates? Because if you don't see that hologram, this will constantly swing. It's constantly in the hologrammed image for you to see until you see it. You will absolutely keep swinging. And so, again, 30 years of experience in doing this, I've seen this. And so, what is that hologram for you? This is going to be different, right? Maybe the hologram is recognizing that your current emotional story about the self, your identity, right? Because ultimately, your change in physical form is a great way to give you clarity on you, right? And so maybe the hologram is your entire story in relationship to is one that is a distraction or an anti-self versus love of self. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that when you are choosing to eat, when you're choosing to exercise, right, maybe the energy that you're bringing forth, the intention is, I don't want this part of me, right? I don't want the 10 pounds. Versus, I love and respect myself so much that I'm going to choose this for enhancing the love and respect of self. They may sound subtly different, but they are profoundly different, right? Because you get to practice hating more if you go, I want to lose 10 pounds. I don't like this version of myself. The other is I actually practice more self-love, right? I'm doing it for love, for self, right? I value myself so much that I want to feel this. And so this is very interesting if we break it down. As you go forward in your life, right, from treating 8,000 patients in the last 20 years, what I've found is that I can get two people, both in their 50s and 60s, both have exercised their life long. One person can have tremendous joint breakdown and a beat up body from exercise. One person won't. Same years and same volume and intensity of exercise, but two very different bodies. How is that possible? It's very possible that the fuel and the approach one person used was high fat, high out of shape. And the other person was love and respect and nurturing the self. And so every day as you're making decisions, most people are looking at the light of what food and calories and all that stuff to eat. The hologram that's actually running this, the energy, right? The lesson, one was practicing and one was practicing self-love. That has profound effects, and that will show up elsewhere in your life as well, right? So this is an example of a potential hologram that you can see, right? And so you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the hologram, right? And so if you have anything happening in your life, right, it could be a financial situation, a relationship situation, or even a little thing like, I don't know, this is happening in your life. Think to yourself, what is the opposite, the exact opposite? And sometimes, just to be clear, the opposite of the thing is not simply not having that thing. Sometimes that's in the middle. There's an opposite, right? Think about what's the opposite. And you imagine what is the opposite of that situation, that feeling, that experience, right? What's the opposite of it? And you start to look at what would be the lesson. Imagine you're having the opposite, right? And what would life be like? Imagine yourself in life having the thing. And that starts to get both ends of the spectrum of this hologram. And you imagine nuances of it, right? You do the full swing, right? Let's say you, I don't know, make up something like you're really, really angry and mad. And maybe this is frustrated and this is, you're like meh. And this is like fully excited and joyful. And this is kind of like, I'm a little excited. Imagine the full spectrum in relation to some experience that you're having. That will give you full clarity on what is the full hologram, right? All the different intersection points, the full hologram. The other lesson has nothing to do with the thing that you're experiencing. Hologram, that God, the universe, or this computer simulation is trying to show you. Once you see that hologram, that you get unstuck, right? Because ultimately these things, the swinging of the pendulum, right? What's unstuck? Like it's, if I use human judgment words, it's good and it's bad, and it's good and it's bad, right? It's working, it's not working, it's good, it's not working. You keep getting stuck, right? And so this is, in the business world, financial world, people are like, money this, right? There's some other lesson that hasn't been learned that keeps swinging because God, universe, simulation keeps making this hologram for you to see. That's why the pattern keeps repeating, right? And so, and someone had a question about like what's joy and suffering and all that stuff. Keep in mind, there's every emotional experience. You know, God, universe wouldn't have created an emotion, a feeling, if it had no value, right? And so there's absolutely value in every experience, in every emotion. It's only when you hold that emotion and experience linearly all the time, then it no longer serves you. Why? Because you're not swinging the pendulum. You can't see the hologram with just one light source. You need that swing. You need that duality to learn the lesson. Keep in mind, if you're just joining and you didn't get the beginning, you can opt out of this and go to oneness, right? You no learning, you're just being, and that's absolutely something I recommend periodically doing. Right? Another way to describe this route is people talk about expanding and contracting, right? So in oneness, you're contracting, right? You're knowing the self. There's no learning, no growth, and that's absolutely necessary. But if you're looking to expand, you step outside of oneness and go to duality, and you look for the hologram. And once you go, oh my God, that's amazing, you integrate that into the self and go back into oneness and experience the hologram. And once you fully experience the hologram, you step outside of oneness and go learn more within the duality and look for other holograms, right? This is the process of getting unstuck. You can apply this to health, to your business, to your relationships, any aspect, because in God's, those are man-made labels, boxes that we tend to create. In life, it's just you. There's just experiences, right? So we tend to segment things. So if this can apply to one area in life, it applies to all area of life, because one and all is a duality, right? You start to see there's a pattern there, right? And so hopefully that's helpful, and you can kind of use that in this year coming forward, and know that many of the desires, wishes, and if you're still setting goals and intentions and resolutions and all that stuff, be mindful of this duality. You actually might be bringing forth previous biases into it, right? So, I've read some things like, what do I need for this to happen? What do I need for that to happen, right? The opposite of need is, right, not needing, right? Or letting go, or actually sitting with and accepting, right? And so sometimes, you can ask the opposite questions. If one hand is like, what do I need this goal? You can also ask, what can I accept to achieve this goal? What can I let go of to achieve this goal? Get that full pendulum swing, right? So hopefully you can kind of put that into use. And yeah, that's it. So I like my stretching and talking sessions with all. Thank you for watching this. And of course, feel free to message if you have any questions. It's a very interesting concept, that I believe can be pretty life-changing if you apply this, right? And so the key is application, putting this into practice. This is not something that you watch this video, you go, oh, I get it. This is actually, it could take years to integrate into your life. And I found that from meditating and looking at all this stuff for about 30 years. These are some of the higher level concepts that I would love to share with all of you. And yeah, if there's any questions, of course, just ask. And because this is not your typical like Facebook meme and just do this and just manifest. To me, this is the meta of the meta of the meta.